If you are trying to improve your life, you are going to get criticized. People will tell you, have a life. You are weird. Why are you taking this so seriously? And if you don't understand why this happens, it's easy to slow down, explain yourself, or quit parts that actually matter. In this video, I break down 4 rules from this book that explain how to stop caring what people think without becoming careless. So the question isn't, how do I stop people from criticizing me? Because you can't. The real question is, why does this criticism show up in the first place? And the first rule explains most of it. Rule 1. Criticism usually comes from below, not above. On your self-development journey, most of the criticism you will get doesn't come from people ahead of you. It comes from people at the same level as you, or from the group you are trying to leave. Think about it. People who are doing better than you are usually too busy building to comment on what you are doing. They don't mock your routines. They don't tell you to have a life. At most, they will give you advice, or they will ignore you completely. The loudest opinions usually come from people who feel uncomfortable with the direction you are heading. When you start taking your life seriously, you stop validating certain lifestyles, and that creates friction. Not because you said anything, but because your actions quietly say, I don't want what you want. So sometimes, what sounds like an insult is actually a signal that you're moving differently. And if you follow their advice, you end up with the life they have, not the life you are trying to build. This is one of the ideas that really stood out to me in this book. You don't eliminate criticism, you understand where it comes from, and that changes how much weight you give it. Once you understand this rule, you stop treating criticism as a warning sign, and you stop over-explaining yourself to people who were never meant to guide you. Understanding where criticism comes from helps, but it doesn't make it disappear, because no path is free. And that's what the second rule is about. Rule 2. Every path has a cost. A lot of people think that if they choose the right path, the criticism will stop. That's not how it works. Every path has a cost. If you stay where you are, the cost is regret, stagnation, and wondering what if. If you try to grow, the cost is criticism, discomfort, and standing out. On your self-development journey, the criticism you get isn't a sign that you chose the wrong path. It's often just the entry fee for choosing a harder one. You don't get to avoid judgment. You get to decide which version of judgment you are willing to live with. The criticism of staying the same, or the criticism of trying to grow. So the real question isn't, how do I avoid being judged? It's, which cost am I willing to pay? One of the ideas that comes up again and again in this book is that values come with consequences. If you want one life, you pay one price. If you want a different life, you pay a different one. And once you understand this, criticism stops feeling like a stop sign and starts feeling like confirmation that you are actually moving. By now, you understand that criticism is unavoidable. It's just the cost of choosing a different path. But even when you know that, criticism can still feel personal. And that's because most of it isn't actually about you. That's what the third rule explains. Rule 3. Most opinions say more about them than you. Most people aren't trying to hurt you, and most of them aren't bad people either. They are reacting based on what they know, their experiences, their fears, their comfort zones. When you change, it forces people to confront their own choices, and that discomfort often comes out as opinions. When you start taking your life seriously, you quietly stop validating certain lifestyles, not by saying anything, but by choosing differently. And for some people, that feels like judgment, even if you never judge them. So when someone says, why are you doing all this? What they often mean is, I wouldn't do this, and your choice makes me uncomfortable. That doesn't make them evil. It just means they are speaking from their limits, not yours. Once you understand this, criticism stops feeling like an attack and starts feeling like information about where someone else is at. One of the core ideas in this book is that you can't control how people react, only how much meaning you assign to it. And when you realize most reactions aren't about you, they lose a lot of their power. This rule is what helps you stop over-explaining yourself. You don't need to convince people who are reacting from a place you are actively trying to leave. So if criticism often comes from below and it isn't always personal, the real question becomes, whose opinions actually deserve your attention? That's what the final rule is about. Rule 4. Not everyone gets a vote. A lot of people hear this idea or see the title of this book and assume the goal is to stop caring completely. That's not the goal. The goal isn't to care less, it's to care selectively. Caring is a limited resource, and if you spread it across everyone, it loses its power. On your self-development journey, you can't afford to weigh every opinion equally. Some opinions move you forward, most just create noise. So when I say careless, I don't mean care about nothing. I mean narrow who gets a vote. You care about opinions from people who are where you want to be, have skin in the game, deal with the consequences of your choices, want you to win, even if it costs you comfort. And you stop giving weight to crowds, commentary, people reacting from comfort, not direction. Once you narrow who you care about, what you care about becomes much clearer. This is where selective ignorance comes in. Not ignoring everything, just ignoring what doesn't help you build the life you actually want. This is one of the core ideas behind this book. You don't become careless. You become deliberate about what deserves your energy. And once you do that, criticism loses its grip. Not because it stops showing up, but because it no longer gets a vote. Once you narrow whose opinions matter, it gets easier to stay on your path. But understanding this is only half the equation. The harder part is staying consistent when motivation fades and no one is watching. That's what I break down in this video. Remember, the path is yours to walk, and as always, I'm in your corner rooting for you.